Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. This is Stuart Cohen from Nodeware. We'll get started in just a couple of minutes. We're just waiting for a few people to log in and get started. So just as a reminder, while we're waiting for them, we do want to make this interactive. So if you have any questions, please put them in the question box, put them in the chat box. We want to be able to answer any of your questions that you have. Obviously, we're excited to talk about QRadar today. QRadar has been, very successful in the enterprise space, and IBM and the QRadar team have done a lot to move this down to small business leaders, to make small business leaders, better protected and secure their data. So we're going to talk a little bit today about some of the things that IBM and QRadar have done specifically for that, and then some things specifically that CarbonHelix has done to make QRadar available for their clients and how they can help other people like yourselves. So we've now gotten a number of people that have logged in. We're a minute after, so we'll go ahead and get started. If we can go, perfect. Just as I said, we'd like to keep this interactive. We did get some questions submitted on LinkedIn beforehand. We'll make sure we cover those today. If you have any other questions, please put them in the chat box. As always, this is our Cyber Thought Leadership webinar, really designed to be a public service announcement, designed to talk about things that are happening in the marketplace, what's happening from a small and medium business standpoint, and what people can do to better protect their data, what they can do to get better started on the road to cyber security. How they can better educate their employees, how they can better educate their supply chain and customers. So if you have a particular topic or a presenter that you would like to hear from, we've had folks from the National Cybersecurity Center, from CISA, we've had people from NIST and from CIS-18 and the like. If you have a topic or presenter that you'd like to hear from, please let us know, and we will continue to make those available. We tend to do 1 or 2 of these a month to provide, once again, ongoing education for what started out as small business leaders, but is now added kind of investors and board members and COOs and CFOs, as compliance and regulatory issues have required small businesses to be a lot more sensitive to how secure their data is. So please reach out to us if you've got any topics or presenters that you'd like us to get on this session. We'd be happy to make them available to you. If we can go to the next slide. So as an example, we're talking, the one in the middle about strengthening SMBs cybersecurity, how to manage security services and help MSPs rise to the challenge. We have one of our partners from SOC Soder talking about, SOC services and how SOC services are helping MSPs that don't want to build those services themselves, make them available to help small businesses. We continue to do things like that as part of our process. And as I said, we'll be announcing shortly a couple of sessions coming up in May around cybersecurity frameworks as well. We also do have a Nodeware demo and a peer Q&A coming up tomorrow. So if you want to see a demo of continuous vulnerability management, you want to ask one of your peers some questions about how they use it, how they implement it, how do they support businesses, we do that as well. And then we're very tightly connected with the 7-figure MSP program. So if you're a member of 7-figure MSPs, we have open office hours with them to help them with their clients, onboard folks, as well as help them with the sales and marketing activities they need. So we've got a number of things going on, but for today's session, I'm pleased to have 3 people here with us today. We have Mark, who's one of the principals at CarbonHelix, one of our partners, and between he and David, they'll talk specifically about some of the things that CarbonHelix is doing to support their clients, and some of the things with QRadar's new enhancements and ability to assist more and more small businesses, some things that are now available to small businesses that weren't available in the past, and let them talk about some of the things that they have to make organization safer, stronger, and improve the data that you have. We're also fortunate to have Josh with us. Josh is a security partner at IBM to talk specifically about QRadar and some of the things that QRadar's done to move from the enterprise space down to the small business leader space and the small businesses. You see all sorts of numbers about the number of small businesses in the United States that are under attack. When we started doing these programs about a year and a half ago, 50% of the small business leaders would say, I don't have to worry about the bad guys. The bad guys are never going to find me. I'm not worried about cybersecurity. I'm not worried about protecting my data. And oh, by the way, there's no frameworks or regulatory things that I need to be worried about in my, little tiny business in my little corner of the country. Those things have all changed, right? Now the bad guys seem to be able to find everybody. Everybody seems to be under a frequent number of attacks. There's a lot of things changing from a framework and compliance standpoint, and the requirements for, continuous vulnerability management to know if a device potentially could have a vulnerability, it could cause you problems, as well as making sure you get, an immediate alert when there's a situation that might develop, so you're aware of that. So why don't we do this? Josh, I'll turn it over to you first, and if you could, give us a little perspective on some of the things that IBM's done. Obviously you've been very successful in the enterprise space with QRadar, and some of the things that you've done to be so attractive to small businesses.
Absolutely. Thank you, Stuart. I'm Josh Hatfield, everyone. And just a little bit of background about myself. I've been working with QRadar for 10 years now, initially with another IBM business partner, Prolifix, setting up new deployments of QRadar. Then went to work more on like the client side at first an airline and then an oil and gas company as like an architect, engineer, kind of wore all the hats. I joined IBM 5 years ago. So I've been working with this product for a long time. I've witnessed it evolve a lot over the years. One of the big ones was that, traditionally QRadar was more appliance oriented. You had to buy a server, set it up, either, co-located somewhere else. And that could be cost prohibitive to a small business. But what we've done is we've made it so that QRadar can deploy pretty much anywhere. You can do virtualized deployments. You can deploy to public clouds like AWS, Azure, Google Cloud. And we scale from the smallest footprint up to very large. But the functionality that you get from QRadar, the feature set, is the same regardless of your footprint. And the licensing model is events per second. So some of our competitors will do it storage, which can be very expensive if you're just ingesting a lot of logs. But volume based, where we're talking events per second, is much more cost effective. And the functionality that you get from QRadar is the same regardless of your licensing size. So you get a lot of great features out of the box, like our free user behavior analytics app, which snaps on top of QRadar. All these different advanced apps you can get from our App Exchange. We're a very open ecosystem. We work with a lot of different cybersecurity vendors and partners to do integrations. And yeah, we've made it very easy to adopt QRadar. And regardless of your sizing, you get the same great functionality and feature set that makes QRadar a leader in the SIEM space.
So, David, why don't we move over to you for a second? We can talk a little bit about CarbonHelix, and how you've evolved, and some of the things that you're doing today. And why don't we, have you walk through some of these pieces first of all?
Yeah, definitely. So, excuse me, as Josh talked about QRadar, that's the bread and butter of our business, right? So we've built a SOC on top of that. We do 24/7 monitoring, but we also integrate several other pieces of IBM technology, like their UBA, user behavior analytics, as Josh said, but also network detection and response with machine learning and AI built into it. They have their own SOAR product for orchestration and automation. And they have an XDR product as well that we have available as part of our service. And that's a Security Connect product to bring together all of your different security tools, whether they're IBM or not. That's vendor agnostic. And then a way to do federated searches for advanced threat hunting across all of those products. So what CarbonHelix does is our basis is built on IBM technology, but we're layering in lots of different things like Nodeware, for example, to give us extra visibility, extra integrations, and pull that all together into the SOC. So, starting with QRadar over here on the left for the advanced analytics and the machine learning and all of that, over to the integrations on the right-hand side to give us all the visibility we need, and then to the SOC as a service, who is a whole team of analysts trained by CarbonHelix, but also going through and taking IBM security analytic certifications to be able to qualify to work in our SOC, and then building custom playbooks for them to follow and do their investigations with all the tools that they have in front of them. So those are some of the components that we have going in. Lots more, of course, but if you think of something, please ask a question when we get to that. Do we want to jump to the next one real quick?
Well, before we do that, before we jump to that, Josh, maybe if you want to think about kind of how QRadar's evolved, any comments you might have specifically on this, and then maybe some comments specifically about how with vulnerability management, how it's changed from what was once a monthly scan or a quarterly scan or a Sunday night when nobody was in the office scan, to now continuous vulnerability management, immediate alerts, as well as just the enhancements that QRadar is adding to help secure the products and the data of your clients.
Absolutely, yeah. So as you said, in the past, scans were more regular intervals. Now it's much more on demand, and QRadar provides the ability to, both within the SIM tool and then the SOAR component, you can kick off a scan based off if you had some sort of log event come in, that some sort of exploit was attempted on an endpoint. You can kick off a scan dynamically right there. And then something else David had mentioned in the federated search. So with the XDR Connect, we sit on top of any SIM. It doesn't have to be QRadar, although QRadar is obviously going to give you the best visibility, detection, and response. But it can run that federated search and search all that data without pulling it in, without incurring any kind of like ingress egress fees from a cloud provider, for example. So you can also do things like a threat intelligence scan, where there's like an ongoing malware campaign or some sort of advanced persistent threat group. You can scan for indicators of compromise across all your data sources with that same federated search capability. So yeah, we've made it much more agile and dynamic, whereas in the past it was more scheduled and more of a regularly planned thing.
Perfect. Thanks so much. Maybe you could just comment a little bit about that. We've seen a lot of change, not only in the small business environment, but obviously in the enterprise environment as well, as people have gone from a annual pen test and a quarterly Sunday night scan, to what's now continuous. And, maybe you could elaborate a little bit more on kind of some of the things QRadar's done as the market has moved to all these frequent attacks on these businesses.
Absolutely. That's a good opportunity to talk about another out-of-the-box included feature with QRadar is the X-Force threat feed, and that's no additional cost. So the same kind of like threat intelligence information you would get can be used to amplify your vulnerability scanning capabilities. So you get the most up-to-date, latest intelligence, latest signatures and everything that you can search across these sources. So I would say yes. We've come a long way from just static scanning to responding to threats in real time, remediating in real time, isolating, that sort of thing, to where you have a very quick response, and it makes the SOC analysts and the SOC capabilities, much faster to respond.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Just to remind everybody, if you have any questions, put them in the question or put them in the chat box, and we'll make sure we get to those. David and Mark, let's go to the next slide and have you talk specifically about some of the things that CarbonHelix has done and evolved.
Sure. And so this here is a bit more about how we take all those components that we just talked about and how we put them all together. So to start, a little bit about CarbonHelix, just so you know who we are. we're an IBM exclusive business partner, so we support the QRadar, the SOAR, the XDR, everything Josh was talking about. But any other tools that you have that would need to be integrated, if you have an EDR like a SentinelOne or a CrowdStrike, anything like that, those all plug in really nicely into QRadar, and we're able to utilize those tools from the QRadar platform to be able to provide a SOC and some response. So for us, it's optimization first and foremost, right? We want to make sure that we're getting quality data, not just all the data. So bringing in and helping you prioritize the data sources, how to set those audit configurations, and really optimize and maximize the use of your licensing, since it is based on events per second. And then from there, once we have the data and the visibility, and we're confident that there's no black holes, and we'll work alongside you to verify that, then we start to tune the actual security offenses that are coming out of there. And what's part of that is making sure that we understand what's normal for your environment, what's not. We start to baseline what's happening on your network, what's happening from your devices, and what your users are doing as well. And then we build custom design use cases for you. So there's no such thing as a plug and play SIM. If somebody tells you that, they're lying. So we're going to build any sort of custom rules, use cases that are unique to your environment, and we're going to deactivate some that might be firing that are normal for your environment. So making sure that we really limit the number of false positives that are happening, and then we build any customized integrations. So if you have a nodeware, for example, vulnerability data is very important to us, because QRadar will automatically dynamically change the severity of a security incident based on whether the targeted endpoint is vulnerable or not. So if you're fully patched and we find an IOC and there's no chance of that getting into a system, you don't want us waking you up at 2 o'clock in the morning. But if we know that it is vulnerable, then we're going to escalate that and adjust the magnitude accordingly. And so once we have the coverage and the optimization, then we put together a custom response plan for you. And that could be using our SOAR, it could be using a SOAR that you already own, and we can make this as granular or as automated as you'd like. We have lots of customers that still fear automation, so we're just the alarm system. We see something, we investigate it, we call them, we let them know. We might make a recommendation, but we don't touch anything. We have other customers who are really starting to get more comfortable with some automation. So if you have something like an EDR, for example, that ties into QRadar. Our analyst does their investigation. They determine that this is obviously infected. They're going to quarantine it for you and then notify you. Or your escalation process might be notify you, get your authorization, and then quarantine it. So we can customize and make that fit what you're looking for as much as you like. And we can even break that down into groups of machines. Go ahead and take an action on this group, but here's our business critical servers, never touch those. So the response can be at the endpoint level with SOAR and XDR that Josh was speaking about. We can integrate with your O365, for example, to disable a user. If we start to see somebody acting risky, they're accessing resources that they're allowed to access, they have the privilege, and they have the business use case to be doing so, but all of a sudden they start to access it in a different way. You're downloading a different amount of data from a different location or an unusual time. That'll raise a red flag for us, and we can take an action there as well. So the purpose of our SOC is not to just toss alerts over the fence to you. We're going to provide actual human analysis, a real investigation, and we're going to prioritize those escalations based on the severity of the incident, and we do that 24/7. So that's how we tie everything together. Go ahead.
So I have a question, and then there's a question in the chat box as well. So as you're running Nodeware and there's with continuous vulnerability management, and a device shows up as having a vulnerability, does that then trigger your SentinelOne capability, your EDR capability, and then do you notify the client from there? How does that work?
So, Mark, do you want to go into how those two balance together?
Yeah, so orchestrating a response is what we're talking about. A new asset is being discovered. Somebody needs to be informed about that. We need to validate, is this Is this a valid asset, or is this something suspicious that's been introduced to the network? Let's consider this a valid asset. The next thing we need to know is, what can we learn about this asset, including its current vulnerability status or exposure? So based on that information, another response is going to be, let's get this information out to the patching team at the customer. So you've got a new asset, here's what we know about it, and now let's get this thing patched. If it's a critical vulnerability sitting on an exposed part of your systems, your networks, then maybe a more aggressive response is needed. We don't want the case where, and we see this, a misconfiguration, a newly deployed asset exposed to the public internet and is breached within minutes. And then what happens from there? So depending on where it is, that context then informs our kind of next steps as well. But the big thing for us is, David and Josh mentioned it, is when we have information about the asset and we have that vulnerability status, then what we can do is use that to reprioritize any security incident that we see appear on the network. If it's a critical vulnerability, an incident involving that asset, it's obviously more important for us to have a faster response. So we can do that. The other piece to this, though, is that we can also talk more clearly about what we've just discovered. So rather than saying we've just seen activity involving this address or involving this host name, but we don't really know what this is, we can now say with Nodeware, this is what we know about this asset. And that might give a clearer understanding to the customer that this is, I recognize what that is. That's the first thing. But then I can also then describe what we're seeing with that asset and what other activity as well. So we're using the information discovered from new assets in multiple ways. It's not just, let's get this to the patching team. It's also kicking off a number of different responses, depending on what it is, where it is, how critical those vulnerabilities are, and if we're seeing any incidents surrounding that as well.
Got it. Josh, you look like you were about to say something.
Oh, sorry, no, I think I was just stretching.
Okay. Well, then we can go back to this chart.
Yeah, and one more piece there with the vulnerabilities. You might have an asset that Nodeware discovers a vulnerability on it, but you know that there's no patch available, or it's a configuration that you can't change, or it's a machine that, we see it all the time, it's still running Windows XP or something, right? So if you have that, it's a known vulnerability and we know about it within QRadar, we can build custom use cases around it to say, okay, this machine should only ever be talking to this other machine. And if we see it act differently, notify you, because you know it's vulnerable. So now we have to look out for other types of behavior. And those are things that we do all the time, a lot of it in healthcare.
Well, then, Josh mentioned it as well, IOC or threat hunting. If we've got campaigns targeting certain vulnerabilities, then we can go looking around specific assets that have that vulnerability that is exploitable by that campaign, and we can do some targeted monitoring for those campaigns against those assets as well. So there's multiple ways we can use vulnerability data with QRadar and activity monitoring that we're pulling all of these together.
So we got a question, one more question about this. And I think this is probably from a, if just judging by the question, somebody that's transitioning into it. Why would I need to have both an EDR like SentinelOne and continuous vulnerability management? And how do I go about contacting CarbonHelix to understand the implications of both?
Well, yeah, and I'll start with that one. So the first question is, does your EDR have any vulnerability management capabilities? Is it giving you that visibility? Because we do need to get that to your patching teams. We do need to remediate that endpoint. Let's say that it does. That's fantastic. We've got that information. I'm more than happy to have a second layer of vulnerability management, so we've got greater coverage. So that might be the first thing to consider. The second thing, though, is I'd love our EDR tool to be on every single endpoint within the organization. And I'd like it to be running, and I'd like it to be up to date. But realistically, that doesn't happen. We have partial coverage with EDR tools. This is what we see. I want to know when a new asset is discovered so that I can get the EDR tool installed. So that's one way, a node where will do that for me. But also it's giving me greater coverage. It's looking beyond just the EDR. So continuous vulnerability assessment, these two complement each other. It's not an either or type question.
Got it. Josh, from an enterprise level or transition with QRadar down to small businesses, you want to elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the challenges at a small business are the same as a large. I think maybe it's easier to, because there's a lower number of devices and endpoints, it may be easier to identify, when you have a new endpoint connect, like Mark was saying, maybe it doesn't have EDR on it already, just to get as much information about it as possible. So I think it's much more faster to respond. And then to kind of piggyback on something else that he was talking about with threat intelligence, we also have industry-specific threat intelligence information. So if you have, like a healthcare customer, for example, we know that these are the campaigns that are going on for healthcare right now, and then you can search for those indicators of compromise specifically for those campaigns. So it's much more targeted in that industry aspect as well.
Got it. So, Mark, maybe it'd be worthwhile to have you talk a little bit about kind of how things have changed. I mentioned 12 months ago, 50% of the SMB leaders weren't worried that an attack would ever find them, right? And, the bad guys will never find me. I don't have any compliance or regulatory issues that I really need to be responsive to. I can kind of go run my business and focus on my customers and not be terribly concerned about, cybersecurity attacking Target or a big bank or somebody. That's all changed. Maybe you could provide some perspective on kind of, how small businesses are now thinking about cyber.
Right. Yeah, and so my view on this, I mean, we could look at statistics to show how small businesses are being targeted, and we could definitely do that. But I think as a small business, my concerns are cost and the effort, the staffing that's involved. And so when I look at, big business cybersecurity solutions, they're going to cost this much, they're going to involve this much effort, and I can't afford to do that as a small business. So I think part of that plays into that. I'd rather not get too deep into, as a small business owner, I'd rather not get too deep into all the cybersecurity threats because I don't have an effective way to control or manage it. So what's changing is we're able to bring these big business tools and this big business threat intelligence down to the SMB, make it available, make it affordable, and secondly, with the automations, the orchestrations that we have, then make it less effort as well. So, tying in the threat intelligence, the visibility, the vulnerability scanning, the security analytics, all these different tools, they're now all available to the small business at an affordable price that is clearer, less effort to understand, and more easy to use. I think that's what's changing. The threat is only getting worse. So these tools have to be able to accommodate the changes in the attackers' behaviors, in the threats that are out there. But we've got some confidence now that the tools are meeting that that challenge. And we can certainly talk about some of the new things that are coming as well.
Yeah, I think it'd be worth elaborating on those, and maybe David, you can talk about those in a second. Josh, I was going to ask you a question. Interestingly enough, we have some MSPs that support some law firms that used to run, quite frankly, one of our competitors' vulnerability management tools once a month. The law firm used to run it once a month. And now their clients of the law firms are saying, are you running continuous vulnerability management at your law firm? Because I want to know that the data that you have from us at your law firm is well protected, because I'm not interested in losing my data from your law firm. So we've had MSPs that have converted to Nodeware and continuous vulnerability management, maybe not because they wanted to, but because their clients demanded it in order for them to stay. And maybe you could elaborate a little bit more of that with some of your experiences you've seen as well, where the clients are now driving the behavior of the vendors or the providers.
Absolutely, yeah, and we've worked with a lot of law firms too. I'm sure CarbonHelix has as well. That's very common actually for one of their clients to come with those concerns and those demands. I think also that I lost my train of thought there. What was the first part of the question? I apologize, Stuart.
Well, it was where the clients are driving the behaviors of either the MSP or the law firms, and how you're seeing that in other industries.
Yeah, so I think another thing that drives that as well is compliance. A lot of either clients, customers, small businesses are trying to align to things like the NIST framework. They're looking at things like the MITRE ATT&CK framework. They're taking a more holistic approach to security. And part of that is, the continuous scanning and vulnerability management. I mean, that's absolutely crucial. So I think that compliance can be a big driver as well as individual demand.
David, maybe, if you could elaborate a little bit of that, as you're talking to clients, as you're talking to prospects, how has the conversation changed? How are their concerns different? How are they looking for, getting started, if you will, if they only had kind of some basic IT support, maybe in their own organization before?
Yeah, well, so I can give you a description of some of our customers, right? So we have several customers that are just 15 employees in a small office, but they have sensitive information that they need to protect, but they don't have a huge budget for it. The HR person is doing IT onboarding, right? So we have those, and the way that IBM has shifted away from heavy upfront costs and more to a subscription model has made that much more affordable for those smaller customers. And we have them scaled all the way up to 15,000 employees and much more, and it's a much more complex implementation. But at CarbonHelix, those small businesses have been our focus here more lately. We've gone from the large healthcare, financial services, law firms, and over the last couple of years, we're getting a lot more smaller customers that don't necessarily have compliance mandates, but they're seeing what's happening out in the wild. And I don't like the the fear tactic type selling, but I did read a really interesting stat the other day by I'll have to get you the source, but it's 60% of small businesses that get a cyber attack fail within 6 months and go bankrupt. And so they're starting to see that happen, and things like
Say that again.
60%. Yeah. So things like EDR to be able to harden and protect your endpoint, things like vulnerability scanning like Nodeware to understand where the vulnerabilities are, and then centralizing all of that into something like a QRadar, and then hiring out somebody like a CarbonHelix to provide the 24/7 monitoring and the actual investigations, because there's no way that you're going to add 15 people to your 15-person team to take care of that for you. And be able to do it in an affordable way has been the big driver the last couple of years.
That's so 60% of small businesses that get attacked, a cyber attack, go out of business. Is that what you said?
Within 6 months.
Within 6 months.
Yeah. So I'll give you that. I'll give you that source so you can post it with the video.
That would be great. By the way, to that point, just so everybody knows, we are recording this. It will be available on our YouTube channel. So anybody that wants to watch this at another time will be available too. And at the end, we'll give contact information available for anybody that wants to reach out to anybody individually, as well as get a copy of the slides or the recording. So maybe, you know, Josh, you know, maybe talk a little bit more about, you know, how QRadar has evolved, right, with new features and new functions to meet the requirements of small businesses that not only have a limited budget, but more than the limited budget, only have, quite frankly, enough skills to interpret and to accept so much data, right? Maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely. You know, QRadar has more out-of-the-box integrations with, you know, log sources, vulnerability scanners, you know, network sources than any other SIM. It just works right away. We've got hundreds of custom rules, which are, you know, the use cases that David had kind of discussed earlier. So it's, you know, out of the box, they have this amazing capability to, you know, with all the tools that they already have in their environment, monitor all that. Everything that goes into QRadar is normalized into a normal event model. So all the different formatted logs, you know, source IPs, usernames, they all get normalized so that QRadar can do things like pattern recognition, anomaly detection, you know, thresholds, that sort of thing. So you get this really powerful capability, and then like the machine learning that's built into both user behavior analytics, network threat analytics, all of that is available to, you know, the small business customer. So they get like really powerful, you know, machine learning, AI powered with, you know, with Watson as well. They get this like force multiplier that basically makes, you know, it makes it so that they don't need to have, you know, resources dedicated to, you know, eyes on glass and doing this. And then, you know, the cost efficiency that Mark had mentioned too, it's much more affordable because, you know, you have that because of the EPS licensing model. There's no like, you know, minimum size and there's no breaking point where you need to be this size to get access to these features. You have access to everything, you know, right away. So
Mark, maybe, you know, for the small business leaders that are on today's session, you know, maybe you could talk a little bit about kind of either the snapshot of, you know, the type of people that come to CarbonHelix looking for assistance, the CEOs, CFOs, COOs, you know, board members or investors that want to make sure their data is being, you know, is safe, and maybe how the profile and those questions have changed.
Well, it's yeah, we've always said that cybersecurity, protection, monitoring, defense, it applies to any business anywhere. It doesn't matter how small you are, what vertical you're in. We've all got the same, you know, shared concerns, and we're all targeted for, you know, for different reasons. I'd say that it hasn't really changed in the makeup of the organizations that are coming to, say, CarbonHelix for the, you know, for this type of service. It's driven by different factors that change over time. Compliance, a new compliance mandate, a new requirement that an organization has 24/7 monitoring, a SOC, and effective response. That might be a new requirement that's driving organizations to go out looking, you know, for that service. But it could also be the result of a breach, a newly discovered breach, and they've done their impact analysis, they've cleaned up their environment, and as part of their mitigation and prevention for a future event, now they want greater, you know, protection in place. And then there's the organizations that see ahead of that, you know, haven't yet been affected. Maybe they're a greenfield site here, so they're coming looking for that service because they know that in order to provide continuous business operations, I need reliable systems that are not impacted by the different types of security event. So it does, the balance of these things does change, but I'd say the recognition of the need hasn't. It's just, you know, different organizations coming to us, different blends, but you know, they're really the same justifications. David, have you seen, is there any pattern in who's coming to us recently that you've seen?
So K through 12 is an interesting one. They've got some new compliance regulations that are requiring them to have 24/7 monitoring, and along with several other things. I think that's the biggest one. that I've seen here just in the last few months.
Well, that's an
Yeah,
interesting area.
I'd say,
Talk about an underfunder, underappreciated segment of the marketplace. K through 12 is, they have a lot of their own unique challenges.
Yep. Any budget?
I think there's going to be another change as well. I think there's going to be another change, and it's something that we're working on. It's if you're familiar with MITRE, the MITRE attack framework, MITRE TTPs, you know, what tactics, techniques, procedures are being used by attackers, and also a new feature that MITRE came out with called campaigns. So what we do today is with our EDR tools and with our security tools, we may go threat hunting for IOCs, or we're looking for certain techniques that we know to be bad, and we resolve those. And we try and bring all of this data back so that we can run all this analytics against it. So what's happening is new tools now are connecting in to all these different systems, wherever the data is. It's cheap storage holding some historical information that might be useful. It's an EDR tool that has a data lake that's not coming into your SIM. You know, all this data is kind of spread around everywhere else, and we want to go hunting for threats. Have you been affected by this? And the traditional way of doing that was by looking for IOCs, let's say. Well, the new way of hunting, a more advanced way of hunting, is hunting based on tactics, techniques, and procedures. Well, for that, I need visibility. I need a lot of data. My EDR is looking for very definitive type behaviors or very definitive type tactics to shut them down. But if I want to go hunting for suspicious activity, I need to see what TTPs are running on all of my endpoints, richer data than my EDR tool might provide. So the new tools that we're getting is taking MITRE campaigns, the TTPs that we know associated with them, and looking closer at the endpoint that's holding this visibility information on cheaper storage that's not costing me a lot of licensing or high performance storage to be able to go searching for that. That's how that's going to change. And I think, again, people are going to be coming and saying, well, I have my EDR, now I want more observability, I want more instrumentation, I want more telemetry, but I want to do this in a way that gives me, again, confidence at a lower cost, and I need tools that are going to be able to see across that. So that's just kind of expanding on your question, how are people coming? I think that's the next step that we'll see over the next 18 months.
Got it. It must be today's topic. We got another question about EDR, which I think is fascinating. We probably had more questions about EDR today than we've had in a long time. And they're asking again, you know, why EDR and vulnerability management? And maybe they weren't on at the beginning of the session, but since they asked the question, I want to at least pose it again. And maybe we could talk about, you know, kind of the differences and why, you know, some people refer to it as, you know, why you have anti-lock brakes and why you have seatbelts, or why you do continuous vulnerability management and why you have EDR. You know, maybe Josh, from your perspective, you could talk a little bit about it, and then David, we could turn it over to you.
Yeah, I think, you know, when you're talking about EDR and vulnerability scanning, it kind of goes back to a security concept of defense in depth. Like, you really want to have as much visibility as possible into your environment. And the combination of that visibility is where you're going to see things that if you were looking only at those tools, only at those, you know, specific tools, the silos, you may not see like a pattern of, you know, something that, you know, on a machine that doesn't have EDR, for example, but you did have vulnerability information about that machine, then you'd be able to detect, you know, an exploit, either an attempt or an actual, you know, successful exploit. So I think it's, you know, definitely useful to have as much visibility, as many tools as possible. And then QRadar does a really great job of bringing all that information together and finding those things that, you know, if you were just looking at one silo, you would have missed otherwise.
Great. David?
Yeah, I'd just say that they're complementary, right? They're doing two different things. At the EDR at the endpoint is looking for you know, your traditional viruses, but also behavior changes by the machine itself by processes. It's looking for other IOCs, ransomware. Vulnerability is doing something a little bit different. It's either on the endpoint and continuously scanning, but also scanning from a network. So if you don't have EDR, we can still look for the vulnerabilities, but it's looking for patch levels. It's looking for known vulnerable software, like in your Adobe or Java. It's looking for configuration errors that would make it vulnerable to the outside. So vulnerability is not really an actionable thing until you send it over to your patching team or whoever is responsible for adjusting configurations. So it's looking for holes in the endpoint, and EDR is taking a proactive, constantly searching every single process for malicious activity, not necessarily for holes that a vulnerability scanner would be looking for.
So proactive versus reactive.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, look, we are at the end of our questions. What I'd like to do is I'm going to pull up a slide to talk about some of the things that we have coming up. There it is. Let me talk a couple minutes about some of the things we have, and then I will turn it back to each one of the three of you to kind of make some closing remarks and some additional thoughts. So as always, as I said, this is designed to be, more of a public service announcement, right? How do we help educate small business leaders on the issues they face? In this particular case, how QRadar is something that hadn't been necessarily available to them in the past, but now through the changes that IBM and QRadar has made and organizations like CarbonHelix, you now have the ability to get this type of sophisticated support at a small business level. So we're very appreciative of everybody on today's call. If you'd like to see a specific demonstration of Nodeware and the continuous vulnerability management and talk to a couple of people who are using it, we have those sessions monthly. The next one is tomorrow. And then we talk specifically about, SOC services and how, if you're a small business leader, what you ought to be asking your MSP as it relates to SOC services, as well as and what SOC services might need to be made available to you as a small business leader. And then second of all, as always, we have these open office hours with our 7-figure MSP members, and we'll continue to do that. We're also at a number of trade shows for people that want to, come see us at an event at our trade show. Everything is on the nodeware.com website. With that, Josh, maybe I'll go back to you. Kind of any closing thoughts or closing remarks you have on, directionally, kind of where QRadar's been, where QRadar's going, and how, IBM is even more available to small businesses than you have in the past.
Absolutely. So we've had, we acquired Red Hat Enterprise Linux recently. QRadar runs on top of that. We've moved towards, containerization using Docker. So we've really made it, much more secure from that standpoint, in that, everything is isolated from each other. All the third-party apps that we have available on the App Exchange and through the QRadar Assistant app are all the code is reviewed by us to make sure that there are no exploits or vulnerabilities within them. So we have a really good ecosystem. We co-founded the Open Cybersecurity Alliance, where we work with most of the other major cybersecurity vendors to ensure, interoperability and compatibility between our products. And yeah, we've just moved towards this model of opening everything up. All the QRadar products and IBM security products have REST API connections. So, when you combine that with SOAR capabilities, you're looking at very powerful automation opportunities. And yeah, just in general, just making all these very advanced and powerful tools available to the small business, client has been, one of our priorities.
Perfect. Josh, thanks so much. And thanks for being on today's session with us. David, why don't we'll go to you next for some thoughts, and then Mark, we'll let you wrap everything up.
Yeah, sure. So the only thing that I would say is, as far as QRadar roadmap, there are a lot of new things coming out. They're announcing them at RSA, so I can't talk about them right now. But we fully support that. We've been in beta with that. We have it running in our labs, so fully familiar with all the new versions. But we could talk about QRadar for hours until we can actually pull it up and demo and show it to you. That's when it really starts to make sense and click. So if that's something that you'd like to do, doesn't take long, maybe 30 minutes. We can run through it with you.
Perfect. Mark?
Yeah, so and on the the vulnerability scanning piece, our approach is detecting as many threats, having the most coverage as possible, and so we can use different techniques here to detect things in real time, historically, go threat hunting. We can do all of these things, but what we're really wanting to do is minimize the opportunity for someone to exploit, for someone to get that far. We don't. We need the EDR tool because sometimes our endpoints are the first and only line of defense. But with an effective vulnerability management program, continuous vulnerability assessment, the goal is to stop the threat as early as possible in the attack. So if we can stop it before it can be exploited, then then we're in a much better position. So let's figure out the vulnerabilities against our assets, close those holes, and open less opportunities for attack.
So we did get a question about contact information and backgrounds. We'll make sure we put that up. There it is. So absolutely, we're happy to do that. I just want to thank everybody for being here. One of the things that I thought about, we provide now deep scan capabilities. So as a vulnerability is identified, when it shows up in Nodeware, you immediately get the links to the deep scan capabilities of what are the likely remediations for that vulnerability. It has been a significant enhancement to a number of our partners, that we're spending, 15 to 30 minutes every day investigating vulnerabilities that showed up. The deep scan capability in some cases have saved them, as I said, 15 to 20 minutes a day per vulnerability, 4 or 5 vulnerabilities a day, 20, 25 vulnerabilities a week. It has been a significant time savings for them, a big productivity savings. And we've actually had an MSP tell us, they were able to avoid hiring one systems administrator to research vulnerabilities because of the deep scan capabilities that they're getting from Nodeware. So it's an interesting approach. It's been a huge feature benefit for a lot of our partners, and something that we could talk more about on our Nodeware session tomorrow. But it made me think about it as we were talking about the productivity side of assisting, our partners with things like that. So I want to thank everybody. Thanks for being on today. Very much appreciate it. We are all about connecting small businesses with our MSP partners. So anybody that's interested in getting connected with CarbonHelix, please let us know. We'll do our best to make that introduction and that connection. If you want to reach out to them directly, obviously you have all the information that you need from them as well. We're going to do more with QRadar, and we're going to do a lot more things with IBM and QRadar that Josh and others and I will be talking about in the future. I just want to thank everybody for attending today's event. We're a couple minutes before the top of the hour. So I'll just give it, back to each one of you for a second. If you want to say goodbye, you want to add any closing comments or anything from there. Josh, we'll go to you first.
Yeah, thank you, Stuart. Thank you, everyone, for your time. I really appreciate it. And I do want to also just stress that CarbonHelix is, absolutely one of the best MSPs out there. They know QRadar better than anyone else I've worked with personally. I've worked with them for many years in the past, and I would give a strong recommendation to them as a managed, security services provider.
Yeah, thanks for that, Josh. No, I think I'm all set. I appreciate everyone's time.
Perfect.
Yeah, and happy to show any of these technologies and how they all play together. Anytime, just reach out to us and we can set up a call, a demo, POC, whatever you'd like to see. But thank you.
Well, yeah, I'll reiterate what Josh said. QRadar, CarbonHelix has been a great partner of ours, and we're thrilled with everything that they've done, and the integration of Nodeware into what they're doing with QRadar has been a significant benefit to their clients and to them. So we're very thankful for that partnership and appreciate the business. And anything we can do for anybody going forward, please contact us and we'll put you in touch with CarbonHelix. We'll answer any questions you and make you up appropriately with whatever you need to help you keep your business more secure, keep your employees better educated, and be better prepared, for the attacks that are coming your way, the regulatory and compliance issues that are on the increase, and obviously the number of attacks as well, and how you can be better prepared to keep your data safe and secure. So with that, I want to thank everybody for your time. We'll give you 5 minutes back, and everybody have a great afternoon. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you.